All right, so we've got our supplies, we've practiced our brush strokes, we are ready to get started with our floral wreath. So grab your bowl and grab your pencil and flip the bowl upside down on top of the paper. And now you're going to very lightly trace around the bowl so that your pencil just barely leaves a mark on the paper. You don't want it to be dark at all because pencil does not lift well after you've painted over it, and you don't really want to see it through the painting. So after I lifted up the bowl, I can barely see my pencil. I'll trace it with my finger so you can see. It's very, very faint, but it's still there. Just enough that when I see it up close and in person, I can know exactly where I want my leaves to go. So now I'm grabbing my size 1 round brush because it's very dainty and it's perfect for this first little part where I'm painting the stems. You want to really get your paintbrush down in the water, get it saturated, and then you're going to dip it into your paint of choice. And if you end up buying the Artist Loft palette from Michaels, I like to use the really dark green that is the second column, third row down. And it's just very earthy looking. I like to add in a little bit of yellow and add a little bit of more water so it's nice and fluid and you have enough on your brush. And I like to start with just a little, like a little vine, like we practice with our brush strokes. And then I just start pulling in little leaves here and there, pausing to add more paint to my brush. Remember to push down to create a fatter leaf and then lift up to make the little stem that attaches to the vine. As you're doing this, you don't want to paint a thin line all the way around the circle where we drew our pencil. That's just a loose guide of the circle that we're going to be painting, but you don't want to trace over it identically with the paint. You want to leave gaps in between the foliage for the flowers, where the flowers will go later. And I like to have the bottom half of the circle with the leaves growing up and the top half of the circle with the leaves growing down. It just has a nice composition to it. It looks very natural. So as you keep going, you want to think about creating different shades of colors. So here I'm adding a little more yellow to get a brighter leaf color. And when you do this, it gives your painting a little more dimension. It gives your leaves a little more depth. It makes them more believable, something that you actually might see in nature. Because when you look at a bush or a tree, the leaves aren't all exactly the same green. They have bits of brown and red and yellow and even blues and purples. So I suggest when you're mixing a green, it's a good idea to add a little bit of yellow. And actually what I just did right there is add a little bit of red. When you mix red in with green, it looks very earthy and it's gorgeous. Just keep adding little leaves where you think that they might grow naturally. And remember to push down to create a fat leaf and lift back up to make it a nice point where it attaches. It's a really simple technique that goes a long way when you're painting flowers. I'm not too careful when I'm mixing colors on my palette. I am a little bit of a messy painter, and so I don't clean my brush off a whole lot. other than just dipping it in water. But you can be more thorough if you like, or you can be loose like how I tend to work. Generally, you want to make sure you get your brush really clean in between a darker color and a warmer color. You can also experiment with having your individual leaves growing in different directions, not just up or down, but they might be folded over or off to the side. You might have a longer, more wispy leaf like shown right there, and you don't have to fill in every single space of the leaf. You can leave white space, which kind of adds a little bit of depth and dimension. If you paint with a little bit of a drier brush, you'll also find that it leaves white space that is a nice effect. So I'm being careful not to fill in too much space, but I do want it to look natural with enough greenery. Generally, you want to be pretty thorough with the greenery before you start painting the flowers because it's a little bit harder to add them back in once you paint the flowers. And you'll see what I mean at the end of the video. I try to add in a little more greenery, and it's more challenging because the flowers are a lighter color and you don't necessarily want to paint over them with a darker color. Here I've used just a little too much water, and so I'm using a very absorbent paper towel to lift up some of the water. And that's the great thing about watercolors. They're very forgiving. If you mess up or you have too much water, it lifts up very easily with a paper towel. And I like to use the Viva brand because it's really absorbent. So keep mixing new shades of green, and it's just really beautiful to see how it all works together. And it looks a lot more natural when you don't have just one color on the page. So this is an example of how I've changed direction with the way the leaves are growing. So up until now they've all been growing up towards the top, and now that I'm at the top, I'm going to have them growing in the down direction. Watch closely, push down and lift up, and you just get a beautiful leaf form, and you can drop in a little more paint of a darker color and it just blends beautifully. You can add in a really dainty thin stem along the circle, and we are just about ready to start adding in our flowers.